4 current and former Louisville Metro Police Department officers have been arrested and charged with federal crimes in connection with the Botched, no-knock raid that killed Breonna Taylor in 2020. Deputy Attorney General Merrick Garland announced that the Department of Justice had charged former Detective Joshua Janes, Detective Kelly Goodlett, former Detective Brett Hankinson, and Sergeant Kyle Meany with civil rights violations and unconstitutional use of force. The DOJ alleges that Janes lied on the search warrant application that allowed officers to raid Taylor's home. He wrote in the search warrant that he verified with a U.S. postal inspector that Taylor's ex, whom police suspected of dealing drugs, had been receiving mail at her address. According to an internal investigation, Janes did not verify the information with a postal worker directly, but rather relied on a false statement made by another officer. Jonathan Mattingly, the officer with whom Janes spoke, was not in contact with a postal inspector either. Mattingly only received the information from a different police department. Janes lied about his verification efforts, and no relevant packages arrived at Taylor's home as a result of the investigation. Taylor had also broken up with the ex, Jamarcus Glover, some 2 years earlier, and they were no longer friends, her family's attorney said. Moreover, Glover was already in custody at the time of the raid. The charges, Garland said, allege that Janes, Meany, and Goodlett knew that the information in the warrant was false and then engaged in efforts to create a false cover story in an attempt to escape responsibility for their roles in preparing the fraudulent warrant. 2 of the officers, Garland said, secretly met in a garage in the spring of 2020 and agreed to tell investigators a false story. Janes and Goodlett also knew, the DOJ alleges, that armed officers would conduct the search, creating a dangerous situation for anyone in the home. According to Garland, the officers who carried out the warrant were unaware of the false statements and were not involved in drafting the fraudulent document. In a separate indictment, Hankinson is charged with 2 civil rights violations related to unconstitutional use of excessive force. The charges allege he fired 10 unnecessary and unlawful shots through a bedroom window and sliding glass patio door, endangering not only Taylor's life but the lives of her neighbors as well. Hankinson was the only cop to be charged over the raid at the state level, but he was found not guilty by a jury earlier this year of endangering Taylor's 3 neighbors, a verdict Taylor's lawyer called a slap in the face. Of the more recent charges, however, lawyer Ben Crump struck a different note. In a statement, he called the charges a huge step toward justice. A separate DOJ team is conducting a civil investigation related to the LMPD as a whole, Garland said, probing whether the department has a pattern of law enforcement misconduct related to excessive force, improper searches, and racially discriminatory policing practices. Officers stormed Taylor's apartment in the dead of night, startling her boyfriend, Kenny Walker, from his sleep. He assumed they were being burglarized, so grabbed his legally owned handgun and fired a warning shot down the hallway that hit Mattingly in the leg. That prompted officers to unleash a hail of bullets into the apartment. Taylor, a 26-year-old EMT, was shot 8 times by officers while they were treating Mattingly. The apartment was never found to contain drugs. LMPD fired Janes in January 2021. He appealed his dismissal, but lost the case. Hankinson was also fired from the department, and Mattingly retired shortly after the raid. Crump said many victims of police brutality are still seeking justice despite Thursday's announcement. He ended his statement with what has become, heartbreakingly, a familiar refrain: "Say her name." Breonna Taylor.